Tara sat on her couch, scrolling through her phone, enjoying the quiet evening at home. The messages started off as harmless, just a compliment about her dog, then a comment on her morning jog. But soon, they took a darker turn. "I saw you walking your dog in the park," the stranger wrote. "I know what you were wearing." Each message grew more personal, more invasive. Tara tried to dismiss it, but the feeling that she was being watched lingered, like a cold shadow in the back of her mind. It wasn't just online anymore. Someone knew her routine, her habits, her life. And they were getting closer. In the dim glow of her phone screen, Sarah sat, staring at her notifications. She had been scrolling through Instagram for hours, almost mindlessly, enjoying the quiet of her apartment and the warmth of a freshly brewed cup of coffee. It was one of those rare evenings when she didn't feel the pressure to be anywhere or do anything, just a peaceful, solitary night. Yet, there was something unsettling about the way the notifications kept pinging. It wasn't the usual flood of likes, comments, or friend requests. No, these were different. Each one seemed to pulse with an eerie sense of urgency, as if something unseen was nudging her to look. At first, she shrugged it off, convinced it was just another bot or spam account trying to get her attention. But as she swiped through, one message caught her eye, unremarkable at first glance, but the words seemed wrong. "Nice post, Sarah. I like the new shirt. Looks great on you." There was no profile picture, just a black circle with a white question mark. No name. Just the message. It wasn't the compliment itself that unnerved her, it was the fact that this person knew her name. She double-checked her profile, everything was set to private. She'd made sure of that. Her fingers hovered over the message. She had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. But curiosity won out. She opened the account's profile. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The account had 0 posts. No followers. No following. It wasn't a real account. But somehow, it knew her name. Sarah's stomach twisted. She tapped on the profile picture, but it remained the same, just that empty black circle. Then she clicked on the follower count. Again, nothing. Not even one follower. Yet, somehow, this account knew who she was. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the phone down on her coffee table, trying to shake the strange feeling in her chest. The messages continued. More compliments. More subtle invasions of privacy. "I saw you walking your dog this morning. You looked beautiful in that red jacket." Her blood ran cold. Sarah hadn't posted anything about walking her dog. She hadn't shared where she was or what she was wearing. This person must have been following her in real life. She sat up straighter, scanning the room around her. There was no one in sight. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tapping of her fingers against her phone's screen. The air felt heavy, like the walls were closing in. She grabbed her jacket and bolted to the window, her eyes darting out into the street below. Nothing. Just the usual streetlights, the occasional car passing by, and the dark, empty sidewalk. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, but the unease didn't go away. Not yet. After a few moments, she returned to her phone. The next message had arrived. It was brief but chilling. "You're home alone. Just like I thought." Her heart skipped a beat. She could feel her skin crawling. She wanted to scream, to tell someone, but the fear lodged in her throat. Who was this person? How could they have known she was home? She called her best friend, Mia. The phone rang, but there was no answer. Mia was probably out with her boyfriend, not unusual for a Friday night. But still, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Desperate for some sort of answer, she opened the direct messages again. The same account had messaged her again. This time, the tone had changed. "I'm watching you, Sarah." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Her blood ran cold. A million thoughts raced through her mind, each more terrifying than the last. What did this person want from her? How long had they been watching her? Was this all just a sick joke, or something worse? Suddenly, another message appeared, and she froze as she read it. "I see you sitting on your couch. You look so cozy in that sweater. Do you like the view from your window? I think I'll join you in the next hour. We can talk about all the things you've been hiding from the world." She looked at the clock. 11:13 p.m. Her heart hammered in her chest as she jumped from the couch and rushed to the window again, heart racing in her throat. This time, she was certain. She saw a shadow move near the corner of her street. Her breath caught. Was it them? Was someone really out there? Her mind screamed at her to call the police, but what could she say? How could she explain this? How could she describe someone who didn't even have a real account, someone who had no name, no face, no trace except for these cryptic, haunting messages? She called 911, her hands shaking as she held the phone to her ear. 911, what is your emergency? Someone's watching me. I think they're outside my apartment. I can't explain it. They keep sending messages and they know everything about me. My name, what I'm doing, what I'm wearing. It's like they're right here in my house, but I can't see them. The operator's voice was calm, but Sarah couldn't hear the words over the thundering of her own pulse in her ears. The fear was overwhelming, suffocating. Her thoughts were jumbled. She was rambling, she knew it. But what else could she say? She heard the operator's voice in the background, but it sounded distant, as if muffled by the pounding in her head. Ma'am, we're sending someone to your location. Please stay inside and lock all doors and windows. Sarah barely registered the words. Her eyes darted to the front door. Was it locked? She couldn't remember. Was the window secure? She was certain she hadn't left it open. But the way the wind had started to shift, it made the room feel colder, like something was closing in. Another message buzzed on her phone. I can hear you breathing, Sarah. It's getting louder. The words were almost playful, like a sick game. Her pulse raced even faster, panic crawling under her skin. She wanted to throw her phone across the room, to end the torment. But she couldn't look away. She couldn't stop reading the messages. They were pulling her deeper into something she couldn't escape. Then the final message came through. The one that broke her. Look outside your window. Her hands were shaking so violently now, she could barely hold the phone. But she couldn't resist. She had to look. She moved slowly, inching toward the window, the darkness outside swallowing everything in its path. She took a deep breath, bracing herself for what she might see. And then she froze. There, standing just beneath the street lamp, was a figure. Their face obscured by shadows, their body still, as if they were waiting for her to make the first move. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the figure lifted a hand and waved. Her phone buzzed again. I'll be coming inside soon. A loud knock echoed from the door. She backed away, her eyes wide, locked on the door as the world around her began to spin. It started innocently enough. Jessica had always been cautious about her online presence. She knew the dangers of oversharing on social media. Her best friend, Lily, had warned her enough times. You can't trust anyone online, Jess. You never know who's watching. But Jessica was careful. She had made sure her account settings were set to private, only allowing friends and family to see her posts. She kept her circle small, her interactions within a close-knit group of people she trusted. She didn't post anything too personal. It was just photos of her and her dog or her attempts at home-cooked meals. Nothing too exciting, just the everyday moments of life. But that night, everything changed. It was a Friday evening when it began. She was scrolling through Instagram as usual, looking for new recipes or cute dog pictures to make her smile after a long week. But then, a message appeared. The profile picture was of a smiling man, probably in his mid-30s, with short, dark hair and an approachable grin. His account looked normal enough, just another guy liking photos of cars and sports. His bio was a generic quote, "Live life to the fullest." Nothing that stood out as strange. Nothing that made Jessica feel uneasy at first. Hey, nice post. I saw your picture of your dog, and he looks like he's got a lot of energy. How old is he? It seemed innocent enough. Jessica smiled. She had just posted a picture of her golden retriever, Max, chasing a ball in the backyard. She'd gotten several likes and a few comments from friends, but this one was different. It was the first time someone she didn't know had commented on one of her posts. But the message was nice, and Max had been getting a lot of compliments lately. It didn't feel strange. It just felt like another friendly interaction on social media. She responded, telling him Max was 5 years old and still had more energy than she could keep up with. The conversation seemed normal. He responded quickly, asking more questions about Max, and then about her favorite activities to do together. Jessica didn't mind. She liked talking about her dog. It was something she was passionate about, and it felt nice to have someone show interest in her life. But then, after a few more messages, things took a turn. The man mentioned something odd. "You always seem to post around 7 p.m. I guess you're home by then, huh?" Jessica paused. It wasn't that he'd said anything outright alarming, but something about the way he phrased it made her skin prickle. How did he know when she was posting? She hadn't posted any location tags, and her settings were private. So how did he know she was at home at that time of the evening? She decided to brush it off. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But her mind couldn't stop running in circles. She decided to reply with something neutral. I guess so. I usually just relax at home after work." He responded quickly. "Sounds nice. I'm sure you're alone, huh? It's hard to find good company these days." Now, Jessica's unease deepened. How did he know she was alone? She never mentioned it in her posts. She didn't have a partner, but she had never posted anything about being alone either. In fact, she didn't even post much about her personal life in general, just random snapshots of her everyday routine. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from him. "You know, I like the way you handle your posts. So real. You've got such a great vibe. I can feel that energy from here." It wasn't just the message, it was the way he phrased everything. It felt like he was watching her every move, reading between the lines of her posts. She tried to dismiss it as a harmless conversation, but now the words felt like something darker. Jessica tried to close the conversation by typing a simple "thanks" and then shutting off her phone for the night. She would deal with it tomorrow. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. The thought of him knowing so much about her, without her ever giving him any information, sent waves of anxiety through her chest. The next day, she didn't hear from him. For a brief moment, she thought maybe it had been nothing, just some random guy with too much time on his hands. But then, the messages started again, creeping in like an unexpected storm. It wasn't just one message this time. It was a series of them back to back. "I saw your story this morning. The one about the smoothie. Looks like a pretty healthy choice for breakfast. You usually eat that right after you work out?" Jessica froze. She had shared a story earlier that day, just a quick clip of her making a green smoothie in the kitchen. How did he know that? The message was eerily specific. She hadn't tagged her location, she hadn't mentioned anything about a workout routine in her posts. There was more. "I can tell you're into fitness. The way you walk when you're in public, people can tell you take care of yourself." She felt her pulse quicken. How did he know what her walk was like? What did he mean by that? Panic began to swell in her chest. It was as though this person was tracking her every move. She quickly deleted the messages and blocked the account. But that night, the messages came again, from a different account. The new account had a similar name and profile, but the messages were even more unsettling. This time, the stranger was watching her stories and commenting on her posts with alarming accuracy. He mentioned her family, asking if her mom was still living in the same house she had shown in a previous post. He even referred to her brother's recent trip to Chicago, asking how he had enjoyed the city. Jessica was terrified. She immediately searched the account. It had no posts, no followers, no profile picture, just like the last one. It was as if this person didn't exist in any real sense. She called Lily, her best friend, immediately. "Lily, something's not right. This guy is watching my every move. He knows everything about me and I don't know how. I'm scared." Lily's voice came through the phone, calm but firm. "You need to report him to the platform. Block him again. Don't respond. Don't give him any more attention." Jessica tried to calm down, taking Lily's advice. She reported the account, blocked it, and went through every setting on her profile to make sure everything was locked down. She changed her passwords, added extra layers of security. But the unease never left her. The messages stopped for a while after that, but the feeling lingered. It was as though the person was waiting for the right moment to strike again. The paranoia crept into her daily life. Every time she left the house, she checked behind her, wondering if someone was following her. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat. Was it him again? A week later, when she was walking home from work, she noticed something strange. She passed a man who was walking in the opposite direction. His face was familiar. She couldn't place it at first, but as they passed each other, he turned his head, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. Jessica's stomach dropped. It was him. The man from her Instagram. Her breath hitched, and she quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't dare look back. She knew that moment would haunt her forever. Was it just a coincidence? Or had he been following her all this time? She reached her apartment building and quickly entered, her hands shaking as she locked the door behind her. It wasn't until she collapsed on the couch, staring at the darkened window, that she realized she was no longer alone. The weight of his gaze felt real now, like he was there, just beyond the glass, waiting. The screen of her phone lit up again. Another message. "I told you I would find you, Jessica." Alex sat in his dimly lit room, the flickering glow of his computer screen casting long shadows on the walls. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic clicking of his mouse as he navigated through various websites. He had always been an avid gamer, spending most of his nights immersed in digital worlds where everything felt predictable and under his control. But tonight, something felt different. It started innocuously enough, with a post on a popular gaming forum he frequented. The thread was about a new game release, a title he had been eagerly awaiting. As usual, he scrolled through the comments, reading others' opinions, until one reply caught his eye. It was a single line, "You should play the game, Alex. You'll love it." Alex froze. The comment was posted by an anonymous user with a username that meant nothing to him, but they knew his name. The sensation that washed over him was immediate. Something was off. He stared at the screen, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe it was someone who knew him from one of the other forums he visited. He brushed it off and went back to the thread, but his thoughts were already racing. Who knew his real name on this site? Most people just used their usernames, and he didn't think he had ever revealed anything personal. He clicked on the commenter's profile, but it was almost a carbon copy of the message. Blank, no posts, no information. Just a name and an eerie, blank avatar. Nothing about this account seemed real. Alex felt a tightness in his chest. He quickly moved on, determined not to let something so trivial bother him. But as the evening wore on, he couldn't shake the thought. The message kept playing in his mind like a loop. "You'll love it." How did they know he was into that particular game? The game wasn't even out yet. No one had posted about it publicly, he had only discussed it in private gaming chat groups. He decided to focus on something else, so he logged into his favorite streaming platform. He was in the middle of watching a live gaming stream when something even stranger happened. A pop-up appeared on the side of the screen, a new message from the same anonymous user. "Did you enjoy the stream, Alex? I know it's your favorite one to watch." His heart skipped a beat. The streamer had been talking about a game Alex had mentioned in passing on one of the forums, but there was no way the anonymous commenter could know that. He hadn't even interacted with the stream, had only watched it quietly, reading the comments from other users. How could they know that? Alex's mind raced. He tried to dismiss it, but his curiosity began to get the best of him. He clicked on the user's name again, this time in an attempt to track their activity. The profile was still empty, still blank, and the account had 0 followers. But somehow, this person was tracking his every move. He started getting messages more frequently. At first, they were casual, remarks on his favorite games, subtle comments on his gaming habits, hints at things he had posted in private. The user seemed to know everything about him, down to the smallest detail. He hadn't even realized how much he had shared online until it all started to feel too personal. One night, after a long session of gaming, Alex received another message. This time, it was different. It was more direct, more unsettling. "I saw you looking at your reflection in the window while you were playing earlier. Don't worry, I was too. I was right behind you." A chill ran through Alex's spine. He had been in his room alone as usual. The blinds were drawn, the only light coming from his computer screen. but for some reason he couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching him. He rushed to his window and looked out into the night, but the street below was empty. His heart pounded in his chest as he turned back to his computer, his hands trembling. The next message came soon after. I know you have a habit of checking your phone every 15 minutes. You do it when you're nervous. I'm still watching. Alex's skin crawled. He had never mentioned anything like that to anyone. In fact, he had never even realized he did it. It was a nervous tic, a habit that he hadn't noticed until now. But this stranger seemed to know it. He locked his computer and stood up, pacing around his room. His mind spun as the realization hit him. This wasn't just a random person. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was out there watching him, tracking his every move. And the scariest part was that he had no idea who it was or how they were doing it. He immediately reported the account, blocked the user, and changed his passwords. It was an instinctive reaction, a desperate attempt to regain some control. But the fear didn't dissipate. If anything, it intensified. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts consumed by the haunting idea that someone was watching him, someone who knew things about him that no one should know. He kept thinking about the comment that had started it all. "You'll love it." It wasn't a simple compliment or a harmless comment. It felt like a warning. The next day, he went to work, trying to push the thoughts from his mind. But when he logged into his social media accounts during his lunch break, he found something that made his stomach drop. The same anonymous user had found him again. This time, the message was more detailed, more specific. "You think I don't know where you work, but I've been keeping an eye on you for weeks. I know what you had for lunch today. I saw you walk out of the building and cross the street. The red car that passed you? I was in it." His breath caught in his throat. How could they know all of this? He hadn't posted anything about his work location, hadn't mentioned his commute or what he had eaten. The detail was too precise. Too intimate. Alex quickly logged out of all his accounts and turned off his phone. He felt like he was suffocating in his own skin, trapped in a nightmare that seemed to have no end. His hands shook as he grabbed his jacket and left his apartment. He needed to clear his head. As he walked down the street, his mind raced. Who was doing this? How had they found him? Was it someone he knew? A friend? A fellow gamer? He couldn't make sense of it. Every step he took felt like he was walking deeper into a trap he didn't know how to escape. He began to notice things that weren't there before, shadows that seemed to linger a bit too long, a car parked on the corner that he hadn't seen when he passed earlier. Was someone following him? Was someone really watching his every move? The paranoia set in. It was hard to tell what was real anymore. Was he overreacting? Or was he just too afraid to admit that something was terribly wrong? As he walked, the world around him felt distorted, like it was closing in. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how vulnerable he was. How easily someone could slip through the cracks of his digital life and into his real one. He returned to his apartment hours later, exhausted but still on edge. He hadn't seen anyone following him, but that didn't ease the weight in his chest. When he sat back down at his computer, he noticed a new notification. Another message. "You've been thinking about me, haven't you? I can feel it. I know you're afraid. But don't worry, Alex. I'm not going anywhere." The words chilled him to the bone. Whoever this was, they were enjoying every second of it. The power they had over him, the fear they had instilled. They were playing a game. And Alex was the target. The evening began like any other. Ethan had just finished his daily stream on his gaming channel, which had become something of a routine. He had a small but loyal following, mostly teenagers and young adults who tuned in every night to watch him play, chat, and share his latest gaming strategies. The setup was cozy, his room bathed in soft blue light, with shelves of gaming memorabilia scattered around. The faint hum of his PC filled the silence, his webcam positioned just right to capture his face as he gave a running commentary of his playthrough. Ethan had always loved this part of streaming. The interaction with his audience, the feeling of being part of a community, even if it was virtual. He felt like he could be himself here. But tonight things felt different. There was an odd tension in the air, a subtle shift that Ethan couldn't place. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from his long stream, or the fact that he hadn't eaten dinner yet, but he felt the weight of something unusual looming over him. He didn't think much of it at first, attributing the feeling to a bad day or the monotony of his routine. However, when he checked his live chat, something stood out to him. It was a message from a user who had never commented before. The username was generic, just a random string of letters and numbers, but it was the message that made Ethan pause. "I see you." It was simple, but the words felt wrong, as if they had been deliberately chosen to unsettle him. He chuckled at first, thinking it was just a troll or one of his regular viewers playing around. But as the messages continued, the tone shifted. "I've been watching you for a while now." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had been streaming for hours, his face lit up by the glow of his screen, his every move and reaction visible to his audience. But somehow, the message felt too personal, too invasive. It was as if someone had been watching him not just through the lens of his webcam, but observing his every move in real life. His initial amusement began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. He tried to dismiss it, blocking the user and moving on with his stream, but the words lingered in his mind like a shadow. It wasn't until the next day that the real dread began to set in. Ethan had just gotten out of the shower and was sitting at his desk, checking his social media, when he received another notification. This time, it wasn't a comment on his gaming channel, it was a direct message on Instagram. The profile was completely anonymous, with no posts or personal details. The message simply read, "I know where you are, Ethan." His stomach churned. He had never given out his location, never shared his address on any platform. The thought that someone could track him down like this, with no obvious connection, made his skin crawl. He immediately went to check his security settings, making sure everything was locked down tight. He had always been careful about sharing personal information online. His accounts were private, and he rarely posted anything too revealing. Yet, the idea that someone had found a way to reach him so easily, with no apparent effort, sent a wave of panic through him. Ethan didn't know what to do. He checked his apartment, making sure all the doors were locked and the windows were secure. He looked outside, but there was nothing unusual. The street was quiet, just like it always was. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, just waiting for him to slip up. For the next few days, the messages continued to arrive. The same anonymous account would pop up, always with cryptic, unnerving statements. "I know what you wore yesterday. I've seen you at the grocery store," and even more disturbing ones like, "Your neighbor thinks you're alone tonight." They're wrong. The messages were never direct threats, but they felt like warnings, as if this person was playing a sick game with him. Each message was more unsettling than the last, and soon Ethan began to second-guess everything. Had he unknowingly shared something that could give away his location? Had someone been following him, learning his habits? The idea that someone had been so close, observing him without his knowledge, made him feel paranoid and exposed. The messages weren't just on Instagram anymore. They started appearing in his email, his Twitter DMs, even on his gaming accounts. Whoever this was seemed to be everywhere, as if they had access to every corner of his online presence. At first, Ethan tried to ignore it. He blocked the accounts, reported the messages, and hoped it would go away. But the dread kept creeping in. No matter how many times he blocked the user, they would always find a way back, like a shadow that refused to leave. One night, as Ethan was finishing up another stream, he glanced at his chat and saw it again. "You're not alone, Ethan." His heart stopped. It was the same message, but it felt different this time. There was a strange finality to it, as if the person was watching him in real time. The words on the screen seemed to be more than just text. They felt like a direct threat, as if they were speaking to him through the screen, reaching out across the distance. His webcam light blinked off, then back on again. Ethan's pulse quickened. His webcam had a known glitch, but it was rare, too rare to be a coincidence. Suddenly, the feeling of being watched became undeniable. Ethan's eyes flickered nervously from the screen to his door, the shadows in his room suddenly feeling too dark, too thick. He was alone, or at least he thought he was. But it felt as if something was standing right behind him, watching every movement. He glanced at his phone. Another message. This time, it was different. It was a photo, a blurry, low-resolution image, but there was no mistaking it. It was a picture of his front door, taken from the street. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced, spinning with 1,000 possibilities. Who was this person? How had they gotten so close to him? The photo wasn't clear, but it was enough to make his blood run cold. He rushed to the door, checking the locks, then pulled the blinds shut. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in as his anxiety soared. He grabbed his phone again, this time dialing his best friend, Mark. The phone rang, and then his voicemail picked up. Ethan's stomach twisted with frustration and fear. Mark was out, and Ethan had no one else to call. He was alone with his thoughts, alone with the growing dread that someone was out there, watching him. The hours dragged on. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustling sound from outside, sent him into a panic. He tried to keep calm, tried to focus on something, anything, to distract himself. But the fear wouldn't let go. It clawed at him, scratching at the edges of his thoughts, drowning out everything else. The night seemed endless, stretching out in front of him like a dark void, full of unknowns. Around 3 a.m., when he thought he might finally drift off to sleep, his phone buzzed again. He stared at the screen, already knowing what it would say. It was a simple message, but the words sent a shiver down his spine. "I can see you through your window, Ethan. I'm waiting for you to come outside." The message wasn't a threat. It didn't need to be. It was a statement of fact, delivered with cold precision. It was as if the person had already won, had already cornered him in his own home. And the worst part? Ethan wasn't sure if the person was lying or if they were standing just beyond his window, watching him right now. He backed away from the window, his mind racing. He felt trapped. There was no escape. Every turn, every move, felt like it was leading him straight into the hands of someone who had been watching him for far too long. He was no longer in control. This stranger, whoever they were, had taken that from him. For the first time that night, Ethan picked up the phone and called the police. Ella had always considered herself a careful person. She didn't share too much on social media, and when she did, it was always filtered through a lens of caution. Her posts were safe, pictures of her dog, the occasional meal she had made, a snapshot of a recent hiking trip. Nothing too personal, nothing too revealing. Her accounts were private, and only a small group of friends had access to her life in the digital space. So when the messages started coming through, she didn't know how to react. At first, it was subtle, a like here, a comment there, just like any other person scrolling through her feed. But then things started to feel wrong. The first message was simple. "I love your dog. What's his name?" Ella had posted a picture of Max, her golden retriever, just the week before. Nothing too unusual about the question. Many people commented on her dog, always remarking on how adorable he was or asking about his breed. But this person didn't seem to just admire her dog from afar. They seemed to know a little too much about him. "His name's Max and he's 4, she replied, brushing off any sense of unease. The next day, another message came. "I saw you walking him in the park yesterday. You looked really happy." Ella froze. The park wasn't far from her apartment, and she took Max there every day, but she hadn't posted about it. In fact, she hadn't shared her location at all in weeks. She always took precautions. She knew the dangers of oversharing, and yet somehow, this person knew exactly where she had been. "Who are you?" she typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. The reply came quickly, "Just someone who's been watching you for a while. I think I've seen you there before. You walk Max a lot, don't you?" Ella's blood ran cold. She hadn't seen anything about this person's profile. No posts, no pictures, just an anonymous name. It was unnerving, to say the least. How did they know so much about her? How did they know where she lived, where she walked her dog, what time of day it was? She blocked the user immediately, her pulse racing as she locked her phone. But as soon as she put it down, the sinking feeling in her chest didn't disappear. She couldn't help but feel like something was wrong, like there was a presence lingering in the background of her life, unseen and unnoticed, but always there. Days passed. The feeling of unease lingered, but Ella tried to dismiss it. She'd blocked the account, surely that would be the end of it. But then came the next message, and this time it was even more personal. "I know you're working from home today. You look great in that sweater you wore in your last post. The words hit Ella like a punch in the gut. She hadn't posted anything about working from home, hadn't mentioned what she was wearing, and yet this person seemed to know both. A sickening thought began to worm its way into her mind. Had they been watching her? Had they been seeing her through her windows? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to respond, to demand answers, but something in her gut told her not to. She didn't know who this person was or what they wanted, but she had to be careful. She'd heard enough stories about stalkers and online predators to know that responding could make things worse. Instead, she blocked the account again, this time hoping that it would be the last time. But the next morning, the messages came again. This time, there was no text. Only a photo. A blurry image of her building, taken from across the street. Ella's hands shook as she stared at the screen. The photo was grainy, the edges blurry, but there was no mistaking it. The building was hers. It had to be. Her apartment was on the second floor, and the angle of the photo was consistent with the view across the street. The worst part was that the photo wasn't recent. It looked like it had been taken some time ago. How long had this person been watching her? Her breath caught in her throat. She picked up the phone and tried to dial her best friend, Sophie. But when Sophie didn't answer, Ella felt the weight of isolation press down on her. She was alone. She didn't know who to trust. And the idea of someone watching her every move, someone who seemed to know more about her life than she did herself, made her feel completely exposed. Later that night, as she sat in her apartment, the fear began to build. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was outside, watching. She kept checking her windows, opening the blinds only to find the street empty. But with each passing hour, the unease only grew stronger. Every sound, every creak in the walls, felt like an intrusion, like someone was trying to make their presence known. Then the next message arrived. "I can hear you, Ella. I know you're home alone right now. I've been watching you all day." Her heart pounded in her chest. The words felt like a direct threat, a warning. It was no longer just someone sending random comments. It was someone who had been tracking her, who had been present in her life, watching from the shadows, always just out of sight. She rushed to check her doors and windows again, double-checking the locks, making sure everything was secure. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was already inside her home, waiting. In a panic, she dialed 911, explaining everything to the operator. The messages, the photos, the strange, unsettling feeling that had been growing inside her. The operator reassured her that someone would be dispatched to her location, but the time it took for the police to arrive felt like an eternity. When they finally showed up, Ella's relief was short-lived. They searched the area around her apartment, asking her questions about any suspicious individuals, any potential threats. But nothing. No one was around. Everything seemed normal. The officers advised her to stay alert, to keep her phone handy, and to call them if anything else happened. Ella was left with nothing but her own thoughts and the creeping terror that had taken root in her chest. The officer's words echoed in her mind, "Stay alert." It felt like a hollow comfort. What could she do? Who could she trust? And more importantly, who was watching her? As the night wore on, Ella couldn't sleep. She sat in the darkness, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her eyes constantly darting to the windows. She tried to watch TV, to distract herself, but nothing could quiet the fear gnawing at her. The next message arrived at 2:30 a.m. "I'll be there soon, Ella. You won't see me coming. But I'll be right outside your door." Her breath caught in her throat. She dropped the phone, her heart racing as the room seemed to close in around her. The sound of her own pulse was deafening. She felt like she was drowning in it. The terror, the helplessness, it all came crashing down at once. Suddenly, the apartment felt far too small. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were pressing in on her, and every shadow seemed to be hiding something sinister. With trembling hands, she reached for the door, checking the locks one more time, then the windows, then the door again. But the silence in her apartment was thick and oppressive. Even though everything seemed locked down, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was already inside. Then, a soft knock echoed through the door. Caden sat at his desk, his hands gripped tightly around his coffee mug, trying to shake off the feeling that had been creeping up on him all week. It had started innocently enough, just a series of strange notifications popping up on his social media accounts. At first, he thought they were just random, harmless messages from strangers. Maybe people admired his artwork or were simply engaging with his posts out of curiosity. Caden was an artist. He shared his work online, mostly sketches and digital paintings, and he had a modest following. Nothing major, just enough to give him some sense of connection with others. He'd always been an introvert, so this online presence felt like the right kind of engagement for him. But then, the messages began to feel off. The first message he noticed was from a new account, one he didn't recognize. "I love your artwork, Caden. It's so beautiful. You really capture the darkness in your pieces." Caden smiled to himself, reading the comment. It wasn't the first time someone had praised his work in that way. His art had a certain darkness to it, moody landscapes, abstract representations of loneliness, and isolated figures. It was the kind of work that resonated with people who felt like outsiders, who saw beauty in the shadows. But the strange part was how quickly the messages escalated. "I can tell you're a tortured soul, Caden. I see the sadness in your eyes. Your art speaks volumes." Caden frowned. He didn't remember posting any pictures of himself recently, but somehow, this stranger seemed to know a lot about him. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe the person was just an art critic with a flair for the dramatic. But the more he thought about it, the more unsettling it became. He had never spoken publicly about his personal struggles, his emotional battles, and yet this person was speaking as if they understood him on a level he hadn't shared with anyone. The messages kept coming. They were never too forward, but always suggestive, always pushing the boundaries of what felt comfortable. "I saw you walk into the coffee shop this morning. You looked so lost in thought, like you were somewhere else entirely." Caden felt a wave of unease wash over him. He hadn't mentioned where he was going that morning. Hell, he hadn't even posted anything about his plans that day. Yet this person seemed to know exactly where he had been, what he had been doing. How was that possible? He tried to brush it off, dismissing it as nothing more than a coincidence. But then came the next message. "I'm watching you, Caden. I'm always watching you." It was a simple sentence, but the weight of it hit him hard. There was something chilling about those words, something that sent a shiver down his spine. He stared at the screen, his heart racing. Was this some kind of joke? Was it just a fan trying to get a rise out of him? He had no way of knowing, but the thought that someone might be watching him, really watching him, sent a cold chill through his veins. At first, Caden tried to ignore the messages. He blocked the account and carried on with his day, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. It clung to him, like an invisible shadow that followed him everywhere. Every time he walked into a room, every time he passed a window, he felt like someone was lurking just outside his view. He couldn't explain it, but the unease settled deep in his chest. That night, as he sat in front of his computer, the feeling intensified. He was scrolling through his usual websites, watching some videos and catching up on his favorite online forums, when he received another message. It wasn't from the same account, but it was eerily similar. "I saw you in the park this afternoon, Caden. You were sitting on that bench by the fountain. I could see the way you stared at the water, lost in your own thoughts. What were you thinking about?" His breath caught in his throat. How did they know? How did they know exactly where he had been? He hadn't posted about it, hadn't mentioned it to anyone. The only people who knew his routine were the few friends he spoke to on a regular basis. But even then, he hadn't told anyone about going to the park. He hadn't even told anyone he'd been struggling lately, caught in a deep emotional slump. This time, the messages didn't stop. They kept coming. They were no longer just comments on his posts. They were direct messages on every platform he used. Twitter, Instagram, even his email inbox. The messages were getting more personal, more intimate. "I saw the way your hands trembled when you picked up your coffee today. It's okay, I'm not judging you. You're just like me. We're the same. I can hear you, Caden. You're afraid, aren't you? But don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to keep you company." With each message, Caden's anxiety grew. This person wasn't just a fan. They were a stalker, A voyeur who had found a way into his life without him even knowing. He felt violated, exposed. But what could he do? How could he stop someone who was watching him from the shadows, someone who seemed to know more about him than he did about himself? The messages kept getting worse. The anonymous user knew his routines, his habits, his favorite places to visit. They knew the books he read, the music he listened to, the way he preferred his coffee. And it wasn't just information that could be gleaned from his social media. It was too specific, too intimate. It was as though this person had been living in his life for months, gathering information from every corner, studying his every move. One evening, as Caden was finishing a sketch, he received a new message that made his blood run cold. "I'm standing outside your window right now. I can see you sitting there, sketching. You look so focused, but I know you're scared too. I can feel your fear." His heart hammered in his chest. He jumped out of his chair, rushing to the window, his hands trembling. The street outside was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps, but there was no one in sight. He checked the window again, then the other windows in his apartment. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, suffocating. He couldn't see anyone, but the message lingered in his mind, as if it had become an undeniable truth. The next few days were a blur. Caden found himself trapped in a cycle of fear and anxiety. He couldn't escape the thought that someone was always watching him, always lurking just out of sight. Every knock on the door, every passing car, every shadow in the corner of his eye made his pulse race. He was terrified to leave his apartment, terrified that if he did, he'd be walking right into the hands of the person who had been watching him all along. He called the police, but they were unable to do much. There were no signs of a break-in, no evidence that anyone had been physically present in his home. The only thing they had were the messages, the same cryptic, unnerving messages that had become a constant presence in his life. But even they couldn't find any trace of the person behind them. The account was untraceable, the messages coming from disposable email addresses and fake profiles. Caden's fear turned to paranoia. He installed security cameras, double-checked every lock, and started looking over his shoulder every time he left his apartment. But no matter how many precautions he took, the sense of dread never lifted. It had become a part of him, an ever-present weight that he carried with him every moment of the day. Then one night as he was sitting in front of his computer, the screen flickered, and the webcam light came on. Caden's heart skipped a beat. He quickly closed his laptop, his pulse racing as the sound of his breathing filled the silence of his apartment. Had they been watching him again? Had they been watching him the entire time? His phone buzzed with a new message. "I can see you, Caden. I'm getting closer." This time, Caden didn't respond. He couldn't. He was too afraid, too aware of the eyes that were on him, the unseen presence that had been haunting him for far too long. And as the night stretched on, the weight of fear grew heavier. He couldn't escape it. Not anymore. The person who had been watching him was already inside. Tara had never been the type to worry about security. She grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other, and the idea of someone violating her privacy felt like something that happened to other people, not to her. Her social media accounts were open, nothing too revealing, just pictures of her travels, her friends, and the occasional post about the latest books she was reading. For Tara, sharing parts of her life online felt like a way to stay connected with the world, to show people that she was living a full, exciting life. It was meant to be fun, nothing more. But that all changed one evening. It started innocuously enough, with a message on her Instagram. The message was simple: "You looked beautiful today, Tara. I saw you at the cafe." She stared at the screen, the words sinking in slowly. Tara didn't recall seeing anyone at the cafe who could have known her, much less someone who would send her a message like that. She'd gone there alone to read, her headphones in, focusing on the book in her hands. The idea that someone had seen her, noticed her, watched her, made her uneasy, but she brushed it off. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe someone had simply seen her walk in. She didn't let it bother her too much, even though the message felt strange. The next day, another message appeared. Was it difficult to decide between the chocolate croissant and the almond one? I could see your hesitation when you ordered. Tara's blood ran cold. She hadn't posted anything about the cafe. She hadn't mentioned what she had eaten or what she had ordered. It wasn't just a casual comment. It was a detailed observation, a personal account of a moment that no one could have known about unless they had been right there with her, watching. The fact that someone seemed to know her every move, even the smallest details, sent a wave of discomfort crashing over her. She blocked the account, feeling more unsettled than she cared to admit. Still, she tried to convince herself that it was nothing, just some weird coincidence, a person who happened to be paying too much attention. Tara didn't have time to dwell on it. But the messages didn't stop. They kept coming, each one more specific than the last. Did you enjoy your run this morning? You were wearing that old green hoodie, the one you love so much. I noticed how you looked up at the sky while you were jogging, like you were searching for something. Tara's stomach dropped. How could they know about her morning run? She hadn't posted about it, hadn't told anyone she was going out for a jog. The details were uncanny, exactly what she was wearing, where she had gone. It was impossible to ignore now. Someone was following her. Someone was watching her every move. At first, Tara didn't know how to react. She thought about reporting the account but hesitated. What if it was just someone being creepy online? What if she made a bigger deal out of it than necessary? But every new message left her feeling more exposed. They knew things she had never shared. Things that were supposed to be private. The next message was the tipping point. I saw you talking to Mark yesterday. You looked so happy. You two always make such a good pair. I noticed how you looked at him when he smiled. You like him, don't you? Tara's hands shook as she read the message. Mark was one of her best friends, someone she had known since childhood. The idea that someone was not only watching her but also observing her interactions with her friends, an interaction that was supposed to be private, felt like a violation. This was no longer just someone commenting on her public posts. This was someone who had inserted themselves into her life in ways that felt impossible. Tara quickly blocked the user and changed her privacy settings, hoping to take control of the situation. She considered contacting the police, but something in her hesitated. How could she explain this? How could she tell them that someone was watching her, even though she hadn't posted anything about her daily life? Would they think she was being paranoid? Over the next few days, the messages continued. I see you at the park every Sunday. You walk your dog there, don't you? She always seems so happy to be with you. The details were too precise. The park was only a few blocks away, and Tara often took her dog there on weekends. But she hadn't posted anything about it, hadn't mentioned it to anyone. This person was not only watching her, they were tracking her every movement, learning her routine. Tara felt like she was suffocating. She stopped going to the places she loved, the places where she felt safe. The cafe, the park, even the grocery store felt dangerous now. Every time she left her apartment, she felt the eyes of this stranger on her. She was no longer living her life freely. She was constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering if someone was there, watching. Then, one evening as she was sitting on her couch, scrolling through her phone, another message arrived. I'm sitting right outside your apartment building, Tara. I can see the light from your window. You're reading a book again, aren't you? The same one you've been reading all week. Tara's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She looked at the window, the same window the message referred to. She hadn't posted anything about the book she was reading, nor had she told anyone about it. The thought that someone could be watching her from outside her apartment made her skin crawl. She quickly checked the locks on her windows, making sure everything was secure, but it didn't help. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, lingered in the air like a thick fog. She tried calling her best friend, Lucy, but there was no answer. Panic crept into her chest, making it hard to breathe. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe the person had seen her from the street, maybe they were just getting lucky with their guesses. But deep down, Tara knew the truth. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was stalking her. Someone was watching her every move. The next few nights, Tara stayed up late, staring out the window, waiting for any sign of movement. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, standing in the darkness, just waiting for her to make a mistake. Then, late one night, as she sat in bed with her laptop, a new message appeared. You're so beautiful when you're scared, Tara. It's the only time I've seen the real you. The word struck her like a physical blow. She could feel her hands trembling as she tried to comprehend what this person was saying. She wasn't just being watched, she was being hunted, and the worst part was that they were enjoying it. Tara didn't know what to do anymore. The fear was suffocating. She had reported the messages to the police, but there was nothing they could do without proof. The stranger knew exactly how to stay hidden, how to make her feel vulnerable without ever showing themselves. They knew how to manipulate her, to twist the fear in her chest until it became her only reality. The following day, as Tara left her apartment for the first time in days, she noticed a car parked across the street. It had been there for hours, parked at an angle, with its engine off. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Could it be him? Could it be the person who had been watching her for weeks? She quickly looked away, not wanting to make eye contact with whoever might be inside. She had to get away, but she couldn't bring herself to run. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere that felt safe. Her whole world had been turned upside down by the stranger who had infiltrated her life without her even knowing. As she walked quickly down the street, her eyes darted from side to side, searching for any sign that someone was following her. The whole world felt like a trap, and she was its prey. And the worst part? She had no idea how to escape. Max had always been the kind of person who believed in the good of others. He wasn't naive, but he had a trusting nature, one that was grounded in the idea that people were, generally speaking, kind. Maybe that was why it took so long for him to notice the changes. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the tone of his messages and interactions on social media. Nothing alarming, nothing out of the ordinary. But as the days passed, Max began to realize that someone was watching him in ways that made him uncomfortable. It started with the comments. Max ran a popular YouTube channel where he posted gaming content, reviews, and live streams. He had built a small but dedicated fanbase, and he was used to receiving all sorts of messages, some friendly, some critical, and a few downright strange. But there was one user who stood out. Their comments were always innocuous at first, seeming harmless enough. They complimented his videos, praised his skills, even made casual references to things Max had said during his streams. But then the comments began to change. "You're getting really good at this game, Max. I watched you last week when you played it for the first time. I remember you were frustrated with the controls, but now look at you. You've really come a long way." Max had no idea who this person was. He didn't recognize the name, didn't recall ever engaging with them outside of his public videos. But they seemed to know details of his personal gaming history, things he had never shared on his channel. He shrugged it off, assuming it was a coincidence, but the unease lingered at the back of his mind. The next comment came just days later. "I saw your new setup. Looks like you've been spending a lot of time perfecting your gaming space. Is the chair comfortable? I bet it is, judging by how long you've been streaming." Max paused. His gaming setup had been the subject of his last video, but the comment was phrased as if this person had been watching him, watching how long he had been streaming, even going so far as to comment on his comfort. This wasn't just a viewer, it was someone who was paying attention to him in ways that felt invasive. He decided to block the user, hoping that would put an end to it. But the messages didn't stop. They began appearing on his Instagram, his Twitter, and even in his private messages. They were always the same person, using a different account each time, but the language was consistent. They seemed to be tracking his every move. "I saw you walking down the street yesterday. You looked tired, like you hadn't slept in days. What's going on, Max? Everything okay?" It was disturbing to say the least. Max hadn't posted anything about walking down the street, hadn't mentioned anything about being tired or lacking sleep. The only place he'd even mentioned his exhaustion was in a brief tweet, but it was vague and had been posted days earlier. How could this person know? How had they been following him? The thought made his stomach twist. Max started to feel like a prisoner in his own life. Every time he left his apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Every time he looked out his window, he felt like eyes were peering through the blinds, studying his every move. He tried to ignore it, hoping that it would go away, but the messages kept coming. They became more personalized, more detailed, as if the stranger was learning more about him every day. "Are you still working on that video project? You said it was something important, and I think I saw you editing it the other day. You're so focused when you work, Max. It's inspiring. It was one thing to comment on his gaming streams, it was another thing entirely to comment on his personal work, his creative process. Max had never talked about editing any video project on his social media. The only time he had mentioned it was in a private conversation with a friend, and yet, this person seemed to know exactly what he was doing, exactly how he spent his time. He started to feel paranoid, checking his locks, peeking through the curtains, wondering if someone was outside his door, waiting for him. He had always prided himself on being independent, on living life on his terms, but now, everything felt like it was slipping away. He couldn't even trust his own space anymore. One night, after a long stream, Max decided to take a walk to clear his head. He needed to shake the feelings of being watched, to get some air, to try to regain a sense of normalcy. He stepped outside and immediately felt the familiar rush of cold air against his face, the distant hum of traffic filling the space around him. The streets were empty, just as they always were at this time of night. He walked for a few blocks, trying to lose himself in the rhythm of his footsteps, but the nagging sense that someone was following him, that someone was out there in the shadows, wouldn't go away. Halfway through his walk, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and for a moment his heart stopped. "I'm right behind you, Max. You're walking so slowly tonight. You should pick up the pace." Max froze. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as a chill ran down his spine. His eyes darted around, but there was no one in sight. The street was empty, the sidewalks bare. Yet the message was clear. Someone had been following him. Someone had been watching him as he walked. His first instinct was to turn around and head back to his apartment, but the thought of being followed, of this person tracking his every movement, made his stomach churn. He couldn't go back now. He couldn't let them know they had control over him. He picked up the pace, walking faster, his eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. But no matter how fast he walked, no matter how many turns he made, the feeling that someone was right behind him never left. The messages kept coming, getting more and more invasive, more and more personal. They knew where he went, what he ate, what he wore. They even knew what time he went to bed and what time he woke up. He tried to distance himself from it, to bury himself in his work, but it wasn't enough. Every time he opened his phone, another message would be waiting for him. Another observation. Another chilling detail. Then came the message that pushed him to the edge. "I see you at night, Max. I've been watching you through your window. I know you like to sit in your chair and stare at the screen, lost in your thoughts. It's so peaceful to watch you like that." Max couldn't breathe. He rushed to his apartment, locking the door behind him and closing the blinds with trembling hands. The thought of someone watching him, staring into his home from the darkness outside, filled him with an overwhelming sense of dread. His phone buzzed again.